Hello and welcome to Ag PhD. I'm Brian Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to be talking about alfalfa. We don't spend a lot of time on that crop on our show, and frankly, when it comes to weed control, there aren't a whole lot of options. So we're going to talk about just crop protection in general for alfalfa. There are a number of things that farmers are doing across the country that you may consider adding to your operation.
We already, in certain areas of the country, have many farmers applying corn pre-emerge herbicides, but we're getting a lot of questions about which ones are really good on broadleaf weeds, so we'll talk about that today.
We've got a weed of the week that's always fun to get under control. There are some herbicides that you would commonly use that really don't work on this one. We'll explain later in the show, but first, here's this week's Farm Basics.
Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
During our Farm Basics time today, we're going to talk a little about rocks.
Well, what do rocks have to do with crop production, you may say? If you've got them out in your field, they have a lot to do with it. When we travel around the country, there are some areas where the soils have lots of rocks that seem to keep sprouting up every year somehow, and there's other areas that really don't fight it. On our farm, we're pretty fortunate. We don't have very many areas at all that are rocky to even speak of, but I've certainly traveled to some areas where there are great big rocks all over the place, and it's an issue every year for farmers, where they're out picking up rocks, trying to get them out of the field as much as they can, or they're trying to do something to manage the rocks that are there.
The big thing is this really damages equipment when farmers run rocks through their combine, when they hit it with their planter, when they hit it with their tillage equipment. It can be a problem that way. So that's the main reason why farmers want to get rid of those rocks. But what a lot of farmers have done now, rather than going out and continuing to pick these rocks up, is they're just smashing them down into the soil. So land rollers have become pretty popular in a lot of rockier areas. What farmers will do is they will plant their crop, like soybeans for example, and then they will go and roll that ground. They push the rocks down. So then when they are harvesting the soybeans and they have to run the soybean head, the combine head, down on the ground, they aren't picking up a bunch of rocks and ruining the combine. In the case of corn, a lot of farmers will roll the ground first, then plant the corn, because they don't have to run the corn head down as low as they have to run the soybean head. But either way, they're smashing those rocks down into the ground, so hopefully they cause fewer problems with the equipment later in the year.
All right, now you're talking about small rocks, Brian. Let's talk about great big rocks, because every once in a while you'll find one out in your field. Maybe it's when you're doing some drainage tile work, or who knows what, but you'll catch onto a rock and realize this rock is the size of my tractor. What do I do with this great big rock? So we do get questions from time to time from guys who happen to hit one of those big rocks out in their field. They say, what should I do? Should I dig it up, or should I just leave it there? Now, once you dig one of those rocks up, what the tendency is to try and fill that area back in with soil. But now you've got soft soil in a big deep hole, and you often end up with a sinkhole out in that spot. For farmers who are doing drainage tile, for example, they don't want to run drainage tile through where they just dug a rock out, because there's probably going to be a spot that sinks in their drainage tile and it's not going to drain anymore. Other farmers may say, you know what, I'm going to get that great big rock because I could sell it to somebody in town who might want to put it out in their front yard for a decoration. So you just have to look at what the operation that farmer's doing is, and digging out a great big rock like that may be a lot of work, but if you can sell it, you might make some money doing it. However, most farmers would just probably leave the rock
Well,
there.
Darren, you stole my thunder. That was the very next thing I was going to talk about, because in certain areas, especially near big towns, there are a lot of landscapers that really want rocks. There are a lot of homeowners, they want some rocks around their place. And if you have a rock pile on your farm and you're near that town, you can sometimes sell your rocks for some money, so that's awesome. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work that way. And when the home economy kind of tanked in 2008, that really did hurt some farmers' bottom lines, because they couldn't sell their rocks for the same price they used to be able to.
Well, it's interesting. As you travel across the country, there are different soils. Some have virtually no rocks in them in the top few feet. Others have lots of rocks. Farmers will manage them in a number of different ways. They'll either try to pick the rocks up and get them out of the field, or they'll use something like a land roller to just push those rocks down in the soil so they can minimize any damage to equipment.
Well, managing rocks is an important thing if you're going to run a successful farm, but another thing that's important is controlling our weed of the week. Can you identify this week's weed?
What's next in weed control technology? Roundup Ready 2 Xtend soybeans will provide tolerance to dicamba and glyphosate and will be built on the Genuity Roundup Ready to Yield trait. See them in action at extendfollowafield.com.
Whether you're feeding cattle, milking cows, or baling hay, the work on your farm is never done, which is why you need equipment that works as hard as you do. Get the efficiency and versatility you need with Case IH. From farm-all compact and utility tractors to balers and mowers, all Case IH equipment is designed with one thing in mind: getting the job done. To learn more, visit caseih.com/livestock.
I wish I could apply all the PK and micronutrients this crop needs at planting.
You can. When your soils are not excessively nutrient deficient, you can apply a whole season of PK and micronutrients when you plant and get top yields at harvest. AgroLiquid's exceptional nutrient compatibility and superior efficiency allows you to prescription apply everything your crop needs safely and conveniently. Research proves it. For more info, go to agroliquid.com.
For lower cost, higher production, Mandako Agri leads with versatility unmatched. Twister is the vertical tillage unit for no-till as well as conventional tillage. Twister's ease of maintenance is forgiving in rocks and has contour conformity equaling zero downtime. Our hydraulically adjusted coulter angles make residue management easier, less costly. Spring or fall, the Mandako Twister vertical tillage unit is the new leader. See your Mandako Agri dealer. Visit northcountrymarketing.biz or call.
If you could see how nitrogen loss causes yield loss, you'd fix it. So fix it right, with the stabilizer proven to reduce all three ways nitrogen escapes. Nutrisphere N Nitrogen Fertilizer Manager. It keeps nitrogen in a more readily available form longer. With today's market and environment, it's a high priority to keep your nitrogen on track. To higher yield with Nutrisphere N.
A proven herbicide for decades, dicamba can provide burn-down residual control of tough and resistant weeds for up to 14 days. That's another reason why farmers will use dicamba for years to come. Brought to you by Roundup Ready Plus Weed Management Solutions.
When we think about alfalfa, a lot of times farmers say, well, I'm just going to cut it in a couple of weeks. I'm not going to worry about the bugs so much, or I'm not going to worry about annual weeds so much, and disease control, well, if I get a little problem again, I'm just going to cut it in a few weeks. But that's really not the way to look at it, especially if you want to get high quality, dairy quality hay.
And get the most tonnage and have your stand last the longest. So just like any crop out there, the more management you put to it, chances are the better that overall crop is going to be. And yes, quality is a factor, length of the stand is a factor, tonnage is a factor, all these things really matter. So today we wanted to focus here on not just the weed control end of things, but also talk a little bit about diseases and insects as well.
With alfalfa, there's a number of things you can do, and I'm excited about that particular crop because you get to harvest it multiple times throughout the season. With something like corn or soybeans or wheat, if you make a mistake, well, you got to wait till next year to try and do things right. With alfalfa, well, the next cutting, let's do it a little different, and hopefully we can get a return on investment. So you can certainly be analyzing things as you go through the year. With weed control, as you're planting alfalfa, we really like to start with a pre-emerge herbicide like Eptam. Use a good strong rate of Eptam. You can control the weeds and be safe to that alfalfa. That helps you get a thicker stand. And a thicker stand that first year is going to make up for a lot of things going down the road. Once you have a thin stand, you're always going to have more issues with weed control and other problems, and it's just really tough to overcome. So make sure you start out with a pre-emerge herbicide. It's a great way to go. Now, if you've already got an established stand of alfalfa, so you're just worried about post-emerge control, your primary weed killers are either Pursuiteraptor or Buctril. Now with Pursuiteraptor, they are ALS family products, and they have some pretty good residual, so you'll get some weed control for maybe a couple of weeks or more after an application. With Buctril, it's just a contact killer, but it's a fairly unique photosynthesis inhibitor that's just going to go and smoke those weeds right now, and you aren't going to have to worry about any kind of soil residual if you do rotate to something else.
And with either one of those products, you certainly can throw an ounce or two of Butarac with it. It's going to be hot. Butarac is 2,4-DB, but if you have certain weeds that you just can't get under control, let's say it's water water hemp, for example, that pursuit and raptor aren't going to kill because the water hemp's probably ALS resistant, and the bucktrill's not going to kill because bucktrill's not very good on the pigweed species in general, you might want to throw that ounce or two of Butarac with it. The other thing I was going to mention, Darren talked about Eptam. We love Eptam. Use it at a half a gallon per acre in most cases. Just look at the rate for your area. But I would tell you, you've got to incorporate that instantly. Don't think you can spray it on with the sprayer and work it in later. Not going to happen. A lot of it will go up in the air even in 10 minutes. So you've got to make sure you're instantly incorporating Eptam, and it's a fantastic product.
When it comes to killing grasses post-emergent alfalfa, it's actually fairly easy for the annual grasses anyway. With perennial grasses like quackgrass, there's really no good answer, but we can use a high rate of products like Select Max to take out annual grasses for sure, and maybe ding up those perennials a little bit to try and get us by for another year.
The last area in terms of herbicides I guess we could discuss is the products that could be used when the alfalfa is dormant. Now, we're not real big on this. Personally, my feeling is if you need to use a metribuzin or a Velpar or something like that when the alfalfa is dormant, there's going to be a lot of damage done. Even though the alfalfa is dormant, it's going to end up hurting your stand, in my opinion, in a lot of cases. So if it was me, I'd tear the stand up and start over. But you certainly can use those. They are labeled, and there are a few other products as well labeled for dormant use.
All right, let's switch gears here a little bit and talk about disease control. Over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of work done on using fungicides to control disease in alfalfa. One of the most exciting things that I've seen is using it very early. Once we get about 6 or 8 inches of regrowth, at that point, we can get pretty good coverage with our fungicides down to those lowest leaves. Once the alfalfa gets much bigger than that, it's tough to get protection all the way down. And with fungicides, they typically just move in the xylem of the plant, which means they can only move up. So to cover those lower leaves, you have to get good spray coverage. None of that fungicide is going to move down systemically through the plant. So spraying at 6 or 8 inches tall, now we can protect those lower leaves. And as our alfalfa gets bigger, we can hold the leaves on the whole plant. Products like Headline have been used, but there are many other fungicides out there too. Take a look at some of the studies online. You'll find some from your area. The yield data and, like I say, the relative feed value has been pretty positive.
Well, in addition to just disease control too, keep in mind that some of these products offer other benefits called plant health. This is especially associated with the strobilurin products like Avito and Quadris and Headline and all these different crops, but Headline has been, at least so far, the most popular product of choice in alfalfa.
All right, let's talk about insects just a little bit, because if you're raising alfalfa, chances are you have a sweep net probably riding with you in the pickup every day throughout the summer, because there are bugs in alfalfa just all the time, all the way through the season. It's just figuring out exactly which bugs they are, if they're up to an economic threshold, and if it's worth treating. Now, fortunately, the price of many of the insecticides has come way down in the last decade, and now many of the pyrethroids that we're using may only cost $2 or $3 an acre. Because of that, and the price of alfalfa, it certainly doesn't take many insects at all to reach an economic threshold if you're using today's numbers rather than relying on some old data that was 10 or 20 years old.
So what we would encourage you to do is spray before that first cutting. You're probably going to have to spray at least 7 days in advance because of the 7-day pre-harvest interval that many of these insecticides have in alfalfa. And we want you to do that because if you don't kill the bugs first, you're going to have to wait after you cut to get that hay off, and it's probably not going to be a good situation because by then the alfalfa weevil larvae are just destroying your crop out there. You don't want to see that happen. Like Darren said, a lot of these pyrethroids are very inexpensive. Products like Silencer and Declare, for example, $2 or $3 an acre. They will do a great job on alfalfa weevil larvae. They'll do a great job on potato leafhoppers. They'll do a great job on most insects that you will have on your farm in alfalfa, but they're not real great on alfalfa weevil adults. So I would prefer Lorsban in that case at a high rate, or just make sure you're using the maximum labeled rate of one of the pyrethroids. That's probably the insect that we have the most problem with in terms of control if you're just using a low rate of a cheap pyrethroid.
Well, there's certainly a lot of things you can do in alfalfa production. We didn't even get into fertility, and there's a lot of things going on there in between cuttings with some foliar treatments and so forth. But when it comes to managing your alfalfa for high yield and also for good relative feed value, we need to start with a great weed control program, both pre and post-emerge. Then we come back with good disease control and stop the insects early, because the thresholds have really come down with the price of alfalfa going up and also with the price of insecticides coming way down too.
Well, one of the weeds you may see in your alfalfa field could be our Weed of the Week. Can you identify this week's weed?
Wake up, breakfast is served. Your roots crave pea. Most of your applied P gets tied up in the soil, a natural phenomenon known as phosphorus fixation. Fix the problem with Avail Phosphorus Fertilizer Enhancer. Avail makes more P available to your roots, here, here, and here. Increasing P availability can lead to increased P uptake in the plant. That's more P, and more P. More phosphorus for your crop can mean more results in your bin. An average of 9.6 bushels per acre of corn. Breakfast is served. Supercharge your P with Avail.
Capello corn headers are designed for producers who expect more. Expect more grain in your bin. Expect an industry-leading 2-year manufacturer's warranty. Expect Capello-designed chopping and folding options that save you time and money. And whether red, green, or yellow, expect row size options that fit your operation because all producers deserve the best. Expect Capello. It's a head above the rest.
Your equipment's ready. The seed's in the barn. You have a strategy to overcome the challenges you'll face, and your crop protection products are pretty well locked in. But maybe you still haven't finalized your fertilizer plans. If not, visit agroliquid.com today. With products formulated for superior nutrient uptake, unsurpassed application flexibility, and proven by years of extensive research, this may be the season to take your yields to the next level using agriculture liquid fertilizers.
A farmer's attention to detail is what makes the difference. You take the time for service management because you know how vital it is to your operation. You service your field like everything else because soil sampling makes all the difference and gets the results you want. Download the app Soil Test Pro and start grid sampling today. Keep your farm growing strong. The more you test, the more you know.
If you watch Ag PhD TV, you'll love the new Ag PhD radio show each weekday on Rural Radio Sirius XM Channel 80. This is Darren Hefty. On the new Ag PhD radio program, we'll take live callers and provide the agronomic information and brotherly banter you've come to expect from Ag PhD. We'll feature a Back 40 segment where we talk to farmers and agronomists around the country to share what's going on with crop production. And it wouldn't be Ag PhD without addressing a pest of the day. Tune in to the Ag PhD radio show each weekday at 2 p.m. Central on Rural Radio Sirius XM Channel 80.
When it comes to corn herbicides, you've got a lot of options anymore. You know, when Darren and I were growing up, there were almost no options. So you just put out the 1 or 2 products that we had, and that was pretty much it. But now we like to talk about both grass control and broadleaf control, and today we really wanted to focus on broadleaf control because it seems like all these Roundup resistant weeds, or at least most of them, are broadleaves. So if you're going to have great weed control, you've got to get those broadleaves stopped, and we want to get 2 shots on them. We want to do something post, but it sure helps if you can do something pre as well.
We're seeing many farmers across the country that are in a 2 or 3 crop rotation. Let's just say that it's a 2 crop rotation and it's corn one year, soybeans the next year. If they're having trouble controlling those broadleaf weeds in soybeans, they're looking at that corn year in the rotation as a chance to really knock them out. Stop them from going to seed, hit them really hard, and hopefully reduce the pressure going into next year's soybeans.
Yeah, but here's the thing. A lot of people are using a whole bunch of atrazine pre-emerge, and we really hate to see that. The reason why is atrazine is pretty leachable, and when you put it on pre-emerge, you don't have any crop growing, you don't have any roots in the ground, you're getting a lot of rainfall usually at that time, you don't have as much sunlight to get rid of the atrazine. What I'm trying to say is when you put atrazine on pre, you are taking a serious environmental risk, and we don't want you to do that. I know that atrazine does have some good weed killing power, but save that atrazine for post-emerge use. You're going to have way less chance that that atrazine can end up down in the groundwater, and even though atrazine is as safe as table salt when you look at the LD50, non-farmers don't understand that. So use it the right way. Don't use atrazine pre-emerge.
Here's the other thing, Brian. In soybeans, we'll talk about don't use your post-emerge broadleaf options pre-emerge. So we see a lot of different products that have First Rate or Flex Star in them or Pursuit. We say, save those options for post. Don't use them pre. In corn, we have all kinds of options post-emerge. We don't have huge resistance issues, so we certainly can use one mode of action that we could possibly use post. We can move that into a pre-emerge use and then just pick a different mode of action post. We're still going to do a great job controlling the broadleaves.
And where Darren's going with this is the HPPDs. Things like Callisto, Loudus, Impact, Armazon, on that you could use post. You could also use that in
or
products pre-emerge.
Or even Hornet. We
Sure.
can use that where we've got a Stinger and also an ALS product. Well, we can use that pre-emerge because we're going to come back post with, say, Status or Buck Troll or something different, or even an HPPD product.
Yeah, so we don't really care what you're using pre-emerge. It's just we want you using something that's going to have activity on those broadleaves.
The other thing that's really changed over the last few years has been guys have been using cut rates in front of their corn. I do think we need to be boosting our levels up probably another 25%, or at least just getting back to close to that full labeled rate, because we're seeing some weeds squeak through our program. We can do a better job pre. We've got good yield potential in our corn right now, and we still have a decent price. So you can certainly afford to do it and get a good return on investment.
If you are having problems with Roundup resistant weeds on your farm, we really encourage you to take a look at some of these broadleaf herbicides that can be used pre-emerge in corn in addition to the grass herbicide, or maybe it's a combination like Balance Flex does have grass activity and broadleaf activity. Our point is we just want to see you getting not only grass control, but also at least some broadleaf control pre-emerge in corn, so it makes the post-emerge job you have to do a lot easier.
Well, I wish it was easier to control our weed of the week. We'll reveal some of the ways you might get it under control coming up next.
The Weed of the Week is sponsored by the Enlist Weed Control System from Dow AgroSciences, a new herbicide and trait system that will build on glyphosate.
Your farm tells a story, one that continues with the decisions you make. Introducing the Enlist Weed Control System, an advanced herbicide and trait system that will build on glyphosate for exceptional control of tough weeds. The next chapter begins.
Our Weed of the Week is Ivyleaf Morningglory.
It's an annual vine, and right there you can just say, whoa, 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 stop, a vine? What do you mean? Well, with a vine, what happens when Ivyleaf Morningglory comes up, instead of just bushing out, it actually vines out. So it has a thin little vine, and it's going to have more leaves, and it's going to wrap around other plants.
Yeah, so think about it like wild buckwheat or field bindweed. That's what I think when I'm thinking Ivyleaf Morningglory. And so wild buckwheat is something we deal with a lot on our farm. Fortunately, we don't have Ivyleaf Morningglory, but in many cases, but in many cases it's the same products that you would use on buckwheat that will also have some decent activity in Morningglory.
Well, the main principle that you need to keep in mind is with any vine weed, it's much easier to kill early in the season before it starts vining out, because where are those vines going to run? They're going to run right underneath your crop canopy or right through your crop canopy. Then it gets really tough to get good coverage. And with a broadleaf weed, you're going to have multiple growing points as this vine stretches out. So you may kill the growing points that you hit with your spray, but those other ones that are hiding could still survive.
Okay, let's talk about pre-emerge corn use. What do you suggest?
Well, I like Sharpen. That you can find in Verdict. That's going to do a nice job. We have trouble with that HPPD family. It doesn't seem to be quite as effective on these viney weeds. If Ivyleaf Morningglory is your main weed problem, I would start out with Verdict or Sharpen instead.
And then post-emerge follow with Status with a little bit of atrazine. You should be in pretty good shape. What do you think in soybeans?
Well, in soybeans, I still like Fierce. I think that does a nice job. I like Authority MTZ. But if you're using our 3 site of action program where you're using one of the yellows plus one of the PPOs plus you're using some metribuzin, you're going to do a great job on Ivyleaf Morningglory.
Yeah, the problem is post-emerge, we don't have a lot of great options. Pursuit is going to do fairly well. Roundup is okay as long as you're spraying real early in the season.
Fortunately, in wheat, we don't have much trouble with Ivyleaf Morningglory, but if we did, we would start off with Sharpen as a pre-emerge product, then we would come back post-emerge. I like Husky, especially at the higher labeled rates.
That's all the time we have for our weed, but stay tuned. Iron Talk is coming up next.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
What are farmers doing to feed the planet? They're using Quadtrek technology, soil management, and planting systems from Case IH to foster a better growing environment that maximizes yield potential. Visit caseih.com to be ready.
I'll share one of the most popular tips from our soils clinics coming up in today's Iron Talk. Okay, I'll freely admit that this isn't a big piece of equipment, but a soil probe is worth a lot of money when used properly on your farm. So, what are the big objections people have to taking their own soil samples? First of all, lack of knowledge. Many people just don't feel they have enough knowledge to pull good soil samples and read the results. Secondly, lack of time. However, you can pull grid samples on 1,000 acres per day pretty easily. And third, lack of experience. The first thing we wanted to do at our soils clinics was to have each and every attendee pull a soil sample and put it into a sample bag, just like they would if they're sending it into a lab. We also had everyone use GPS on their phones to go to specific coordinates, just like they would pulling grid samples in their fields at home. The big thing comes down to feeling comfortable pulling soil samples. Through our clinics, we hope to give the knowledge necessary to pull your own soil samples, the experience actually pulling samples, and an idea of how quickly it can be done when you get home. A good stainless steel probe is about a $100 investment. Find your spots in the field to take your sample, pull 8 to 10 cores in that area, mix them together, and put about a quart of that mixture into a sample bag. There's not a whole lot more to it than that. A good soil sampling program on our farm guides the hundreds of thousands of dollars we invest in fertility each year. Taking our own samples gives us the confidence that we have good data to work from. Judging by our yield increases we've been able to make and the purity of the water coming out of our tile lines, the return on investment from a $100 soil probe has been very good for us. I'm confident it will be for you as well. That's all for today's Iron Talk, and now back to the show.
You can put more bushels in your bin without expanding the farm with Yield Track. The new 24-row planter from Titan Machinery features the Case IH Early Riser planting system. Yield Track will take you to the field first with extra flotation come spring. The tracks eliminate pinched rows and reduce compaction. All 22 and 30-inch Yield Tracks come loaded with Case IH technology, including cable drive and AccuRow. Grab more bushels from every acre with Yield Track from Titan Machinery.
Looking to maximize yield? Quick Roots is a microbial seed inoculant that allows the plant root to explore a greater volume of soil, the key to higher yields. Quick Roots continues to generate yield response on corn, soybeans, wheat, and more. Quick Roots is applied to the seeds so the live microorganisms go right to work, enhancing seedling vigor, increasing the uptake of certain nutrients, including NPK, and expanding root volume. Maximize yield on your farm this season. Call TJ Technologies or your local dealer and get your Quick Roots today.
For lower cost, higher production, see your Mandaco Agri-Dealer. Ask about the best production-built land roller on the market. Mandaco, simple design for easy transport to easy use. 12 to 85-foot widths, heavy-duty 4x8 3/8-inch tube frame, and now available with a steerable wing wheel. Mandaco land rollers, improved soil-to-seed contact, faster, more uniform germination, less moisture loss, eliminate downtime due to rocks. See your Mandaco Agri-Dealer. Visit northcountrymarketing.biz or call.
A farmer's attention to detail is what makes the difference. You take the time for service management because you know how vital it is to your operation. You service your field like everything else because soil sampling makes all the difference and gets the results you want. Download the app Soil Test Pro and start grid sampling today. Keep your farm growing strong. The more you test, the more you know.
If you watch Ag PhD TV, you'll love the new Ag PhD radio show each weekday on Rural Radio Sirius XM Channel 80. This is Darren Hefty. On the new Ag PhD radio program, we'll take live callers and provide the agronomic information and brotherly banter you've come to expect from Ag PhD. We'll feature a Back 40 segment where we talk to farmers and agronomists around the country to share what's going on with crop production. And it wouldn't be Ag PhD without addressing a pest of the day. Tune in to the Ag PhD radio show each weekday at 2 p.m. Central on Rural Radio Sirius XM Channel 80.
Closed captioning for Ag PhD is sponsored by Norwood Sales.
The all-new S-Cube commercial tender is the only tender on the market with poly tanks, giving you the capability to haul seed, fertilizer, water, or liquid fertilizer. Each cube can hold 300 units of seed, 2,000 gallons of liquid, or 300 cubic feet of fertilizer. Options include full functioning wireless remote, stainless steel conveyors, and self-contained hydraulics. Get yours today at Norwood Sales.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's show, but be sure to tune in again next time for another Weed of the Week, Farm Basics, Iron Talk, and a whole lot more. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.
Subsurface drainage tile is used around your home and in farmers' fields to remove excess water safely. As water filters down through several feet of soil, it is purified naturally. To learn more about clean water leaving farm fields, visit the Responsible Nutrient Management Foundation at rnmf.org.